In this episode, I'm taking the V8 MX-5 from this to this, and this to this. Even more exciting, the first start in over 1 year since pulling it apart. So as cheesy as it is to say, buckle up because this episode is going to be a good one. Welcome back to the channel, and I'm going to be working on the Bullet Roadster. Again, this is my V8 MX-5 Miata that was built in Queensland, Australia in the 90s. I've made a full video on it, so you're welcome to check out the history and whatnot. But I've been working on this car tirelessly, if that's even a word. Pretty much, I just reinstalled the diff. I've done a few different videos on this car. The car is not working, it has some problems, and I'm so eager to get it on the road and to drive it. And now it's about to thunderstorm, so I'm just gonna get straight into it. First up, I'm pretty sure I have a leaky transmission. This transmission is a T5 Tremec Bog Warner found in the early Ford Falcons and Holden Commodores. But before I can do anything, I need access. So out comes the extractors. Access was a real issue with these extractors, so other parts needed to come out on either side. The passenger extractor houses the O2 sensor, which may as well have been welded shut, and it took me a while to figure out that I can just easily disconnect the sensor at the loom. What a great waste of time. These extractors have unfortunately caused body damage, so I'll need to set them aside and figure out how to make them cooler to the touch later. Now, back to the transmission. I figured the leak is coming from the speed sensor, so out she comes. While I'm here, a quick oil change is well deserved. No idea when that was last done. And maybe even replace some seals on the box. Before I started taking parts off my T5 gearbox, I thought, hey, it might be a good idea just to call around and see if there's anyone who holds some seals or any other parts for it. No one has these parts. Then I called around some of the recommended places, and I ended up my last call, and he literally told me the T5 manual gearboxes, you can't find parts. You can buy a reconditioned box for about $3,000 Australian. Because of this, people are swapping in the automatic gearboxes. And he literally told me if I had to rebuild my gearbox, it's not possible, and I would have to try and source a reconditioned one. Naturally, this put me in a panic, so I kept calling around and ended up speaking to an absolute legend by the name of Paul from Malwood Auto in Queensland, Australia. Here's how it went. I'm chasing down parts, and all your main large distributors don't have parts for this box. I've been told by the last bloke I spoke to, who's a big transmission guy in Melbourne, that they don't make parts for them. It's pretty much rubbish. You have to, you'll be paying thousands to find parts for it. Is that true?
We pretty much could build a brand new V8 T5 for like a Commodore. We could. Like, we've got new input shafts, we've got clusters, gears. Yes, we'd have to use a second-hand rear extension housing.
Yeah.
They don't make those new. But yeah, we've got a few cases. We bring in brand new T5s from Tremec. Yes, they are designed for a Mustang, so like their extension housing is different, the input shaft, spline diameter and length is different, things like that.
Yeah.
We have ways and means to make things work.
Thanks for your time, man. You've been the most helpful out of everyone in Melbourne.
No worries, mate.
All right, take care.
Thank you. See you, Phil.
I'm actually so happy that I called them. I know they're in Queensland, but it gives me a lot of confidence that I can actually get parts from my gearbox. It's not all doom and gloom like all the Melbourne guys are telling me. So after the phone call, I got reassurance that my seals are probably okay for the moment, and using parts in my garage, I changed the O-ring and gear on the speed sensor in an attempt to stop the leak and fix my dodgy speedo readings. Off camera, everything goes back in, and time to top up with the correct fluid this time. High temperature thread sealant on the plugs. I'm shifting the gears to allow the oil to settle before a final top up.
Gearbox is now sealed, fluid has been changed. Not exactly sure what was in there before, but it was a thicker oil, so maybe it was the wrong oil, and it's now as per what is recommended in the manual. And I also got a second opinion from a specialist who also told me to use this automatic transmission fluid, which is a lot lighter. Next thing to do is to move on to the sump. It is the last leaky bit underneath the car, and then I can start moving on to the engine, change some gaskets. I'm really keen, almost there. All right, sump. Let's do the sump.
This would probably be the third oil change in 12 months, but it had to come out. To give me access to the sump, a bunch of parts are in the way and need to come out. The sump had old looking bolts, and removing two quickly confirmed my suspicions.
These bolts should be the same size. They're opposites from each other. I reckon this bolt here probably isn't even holding anything, hence why the sump is leaking.
The power steering pump will get messy, so I had to suck out whatever fluid I could before removing it. And just like that, I have the access I need to lower the sump, but the work has only begun. Both sides are caked on with cork, gasket and glue, which took many grueling hours to clean. Probably one of the worst tasks so far. My commitment here is to clean every single part that comes off the car, and if it needs it, throw on a coat of high temperature paint.
I'm not super happy with how the sump came out. This is flat black, and it doesn't look great. They didn't have gloss black or satin black when I was buying. You're not gonna see it, it's under the car, but you can obviously see the difference. This is satin black. But at least then I'm ready to throw it in the car.
A trip to the local bolt store and I got myself new bolts and washers. I prepped the mating surfaces, and on the sump ran a thick bead of ultra black RTV. Can't forget the small things. It might look easy, but this was one of the most frustrating installs, as I kept bumping into things, not only smudging the RTV glue, but scratching the new paint job. It made me very sad. After waiting an hour with all the bolts finger tight, it was time to get out the torque wrench and the Rover V8 manual. With all that done, I can put everything together. This pump for sure needed a paint job before being installed. I needed to improvise a little on the lines. A quick clean and majority is back on the car. So I don't forget, I'll fill up the power steering fluid and bleed the system by turning the wheels side to side. Easy done. The sway bar is the final piece to this puzzle.
All right, the sump is in. It was a difficult job, but we got there in the end. It's about 24 hours, which is tomorrow, before I can put oil. But I'm gonna hold off from the oil for a bit because I've got other parts to look after. I'm very excited to start on the top of the engine. I've got a few things to do there before I can get this car on the road.
To make more room, the broken AC is coming out, and I've decided to delete it because this car won't be a daily, plus my radiator has no place for a disgusting AC core that I just pulled out. I guess you could also call this weight reduction. To give me access, I'm removing some interior which will help me later with wiring. This is a useless two-way valve that needs to go in the bin, but I'll come back to that later. What's most important is that I need a quick wheel alignment, and after removing parts from the front end, who better to solve my problem than Max from SchneidX Auto. Max is going to perform the ancient skill of string alignments.
I just want to get it to your shop because you've got all the digital equipment, but why would someone need to do this string line process?
So if you've worked on your own car, if you've done anything relating to your shock or your strut, your lower control arm, which is in here, or your steering, so if you've pulled out the steering rack and things have changed, basically your alignment's going to be out. Now if you do a full rebuild and tear everything down, the alignment's going to be more out than if you just did a small job. And the goal is to make it drive straight enough to get it to the shop.
Okay, but you wouldn't recommend this process to do like a professional job unless you have the equipment. Like you need, if you're going to do a string line alignment, you need like some proper equipment. You need to know what you're doing, is that right?
If you do this string line wheel alignment that we'll do, it's not as professional and not as accurate as a proper shop.
One less thing to worry about, and now I'm removing the plenum chamber and vacuum hoses to give me access to the rocket covers. Fun fact, these trumpets play a critical role with dispersing air equally in the chamber, which is news to me until I looked it up. Hopefully resealing this will solve my vacuum leak, but I'm very far away from worrying about that right now.
So I've started labeling a lot of the wires because I'm actually going to pull the wires back to give me more room so I can access the rocket covers, but also I'd like to clean around here as much as possible because I don't want to remove the manifold and the fuel rail. I just don't think it's worth doing. And then I'll be able to tackle the rocket covers, which should be pretty straightforward because I think there's a rubber seal and I don't have to deal with any glue.
Finally, I have access to the rocket covers and they are really putting up a fight, which could only mean one thing: more gasket residue to clean, which takes yet ages once again. These rocket covers can use a paint job and a color change. To remove the paint, I'm using paint stripper, which seems to be the most effective way. Don't smell it, it's nasty. Whilst that's doing its thing, I'm going to be tackling the full exhaust with a wire wheel ready for some high heat proof paint. At the same time, I'm ready to paint the rocket covers, so I'm proving to myself that I can multitask even though everyone who knows me would disagree. Look at me go, so efficient.
And this is the final product. I went with the gold, match my calipers. I'm painting them the same color. It looks good from at least this distance and I'm happy with it. So I'm gonna go get those seals for all the bits and pieces, seal the rocket cover and throw it onto the car.
With the rocket covers ready, making sure both mating surfaces are clean, I'm putting a bead of ultra black RTV glue and using rubber OEM gaskets so future me doesn't cry. The RTV glue rule is to lay a solid bead, bolts are finger tight, wait 1 hour, then torque to spec. These are pretty solid results from a good 1 meter distance, but don't get too close. To reduce the heat of my extractors, I'm also going to wrap them on top of the 3 coats of paint. Not the best job, but the wrap is tight and my skin is extremely irritated. The extractors are ready to be installed with some copper RTV glue and metal gaskets. The colors are really coming together, in my mind anyway. Tail shaft goes back in along with the starter motor, and now I'm keen to install the rest of the exhaust.
So I'm ready to put in my exhaust. It is all painted, and I just realized that when I was installing my headers, instead of using copper RTV glue, I actually used copper E's, which is wrong. Now, lucky for me, I use metal gaskets, so because the surface is flat, it's probably not going to make too much of a difference. But for the exhaust flanges, I don't have any metal gaskets and I couldn't find any either. I'm not going to go and buy some that I can cut up. It's just too much of a hassle. I'm just going to be using instead this Permatex RTV glue, which is a copper glue rated at a higher temperature for exhausts. Normally I would like to have done a glue and metal gasket combination, but I'm just using the glue. I'm going to send it and hope for the best.
And that's a job well done. Don't mind the mismatched color scheme, as I wanted to use all the paint I had on hand. And besides, it looks quite deliberate anyway. Now onto the fun part. I'm installing an oil pressure gauge as the one on my cluster is broken, an oil temperature gauge to further monitor the engine cooling, and vacuum gauge because that seemed to have been my biggest issue in the first place. Rover V8 engines can be found in a vast amount of British cars and are known to overheat, leading to warped heads due to being an aluminium block. So it's really important that the engine stays cool, otherwise well monitored at the minimum. If I wanted to go a step further, it is recommended I install a cylinder head temperature gauge with an inbuilt alarm, but I'm convinced it's not required just yet.
Wiring is definitely not my strong point, but I think this is a pretty bad wiring job. What I'm trying to do now is I'm splitting all the heat shrink so I can get to all the wires to understand where they go, especially the battery is disconnected, so I'm doing this without any power. But this unit here is pretty much almost identical to the new one that I've got, so I'm using the same instructions to work out what wires go where, and there's obviously some indications of what happens, but I think this is a relay, and it's just bizarre.
wires going to really weird places, and there's a lot of different connections along the way. So I'm pretty happy if I'm able to delete a bunch of this stuff. I kind of wish that I took more photos at the beginning so I can see where they plug into, but I guess when I'm all done and dusted, if the car doesn't start, it means that I've disconnected something important. But this is a standalone unit, so I can't imagine it being an issue.
Making some good progress on wiring, I'm also thinking about the heater hose setup.
Pretty much. I still want to keep the heater now that the aircon's gone. I do want to have a bypass, so when the heater is not working or when I'm not using it in summer, the coolant will still flow through the engine rather than have a blocking off spot here. This is what used to be there, and as you can see, when the heater's not on, it blocks the coolant and the flow is stopped, therefore causing corrosion. I've got this bypass from Amazon, which I wasn't super excited about. Other than the electronic ones, you won't be able to find a manual valve, obviously because it's not convenient. So what that leaves me with is having to buy a bunch of random parts from an auto store that are universal. Worst case scenario, I buy them, I order them in, and if they don't fit, I'll just return them. That's kind of how things have been going with this car. Because I can't just put a model number in and a registration, I've just been having to buy heaps of shit and return it when I don't need it.
So back to the wiring, I'm starting to reinstall the loom. This can't be good, but I need to leave it for now and move on.
I'm using this heat tape that I have been wrapping all my electrical components with and some of my coolant heater hoses. I'm also doing it for aesthetics. These old plastic and the tape that holds it together is not looking too great, and when you wrap it, it looks so much better. Although it may not do a lot for heat, it just makes the engine bay look that much neater, and it adds a bit more life to these things. I think it's 100% worth doing.
I'm going to be sealing my plenum chamber, and then we're going to be moving on to some coolant stuff. So this is the bracket for my radiator, which I need to spray paint. And then I've got some random bits of hoses that I've just bought from the local parts store. These are Holden hoses, so obviously gonna have to cut them to size. And then yeah, just miscellaneous stuff that I could get my hands on. That's the way it's gonna have to go, and I might have to relocate some of the heater hoses just so they fit better than what they did before. And then I'm really close. I've just got to get this radiator in after the electronics is done. I've got to wire up my gauges, but after this radiator's in, that is the point where I will be very close to starting the car. So I'm very excited. Let's go.
I've taken the opportunity to really clean the engine and inside the plenum chamber while I have access before applying a light film of ultra grey RTV glue. Finger tight on the bolts. I'll let this dry for an hour, then torque it up.
20 Newton meters of torque is what the manual says, and we can move on to the next thing.
It's looking really good, but I've run into a problem. This sensor is broken. I've pulled the back off to see if I can repair it, but it's a no-go. It's called a throttle position sensor, and it could be the culprit to my rough idle issues, so I'll need to order a new one from the UK and wait a few weeks. Either way, things are looking good and I'm ready to install the radiator bracket.
So close, and I've popped the thread. This bracket, I would have assumed the threads would be pretty strong because it's holding the radiator on its own, but I'm probably going to have to re-tap the threads and maybe change the bolts because I don't want this thing falling off the car. Yeah, it just means I'm not going to start it today. Need to go buy bolts and stuff. What a shame.
Sometimes buying new nuts and bolts is worth the trouble because most of the time the old ones have been either stripped or stretched. Luckily, I already had the right tool to tap in new threads, but leverage was a bit of an issue. But with that done, my radiator can now go in.
Here's my radiator that's going to be put into this Bullet now. I got this rebuilt in Victoria. The place is called Radformer Radiators. It's in Baronia. Guy's name is Anthony. He is an absolute gun. He rebuilt this whole thing from scratch with the radiator that I gave him, and he found a lot of flaws with my existing radiator that would have possibly caused overheating in the engine. But this is great. I've got a new fan. I've just wired up a new system, and I'm hoping that this is going to be be the radiator that stays in the car and cools it moving forward without any problems. But it looks great either way. Brand new radiator, I'm very excited to put it in, and he even rigged me up some proper mounts as well, which I didn't have previously. So very keen to get this in because it is the last piece to the puzzle.
Is this too close? How close is too close? Geez, it doesn't have a lot of room. I would say a couple millimeters. Just depends. This has stiff engine mounts. I don't know how much the engine's going to move, but I'm really hoping that's enough space. What do you think?
This is my coolant piping. It's the stainless steel metal ones with the rubbers on the ends. It looks nice, looks cool, but I've been told they suck, and to ditch it, I'm too far deep. These costed about 60 bucks for a pair, and I think I'm just gonna go ahead and use them and see what happens. All my coolant pipes are now dialed in, everything's tightened, my radiator's in, and I've also tested some of the electronics for the fan and the fan bypass. So I know the fan works, and I know that the module that controls the temperature and the fan also works as well. I'm very, very close. I've got a few things to tidy up in the cabin and install some gauges. Then I can put some oil in the engine. And then when I get my last part from the UK, which is the TPS sensor, then I'll be able to wire it in and then finally turn the key to this project. All right, so I've put some oil in the car. It's not running any coolant yet. I'm not planning on starting it. I want to crank the engine so that the oil can basically circulate through the engine. It's been about a year since the car has ran, and it's been months since the car hasn't had oil in it. So here we go. The gauges don't seem to be doing anything. Okay, I don't know what's going on with the gauges, but let the oil seep in and then it'll become my problem in the next few days and I can actually finally start it with some coolant. I'm very excited to start this car. I'm just going to clean up all the wiring, figure out why my gauges are not doing their thing. It just could be that the car needs to be on.
My sensor has arrived. The box is a bit damaged. Hopefully that doesn't mean that the part is damaged. This is a refurbished part. It's not even brand new. It costed me $300 and I am going to have to snip these wires, solder it onto my system and pray that I didn't waste $300 of my hard-earned money for this stupid sensor to keep my car alive. But this is the final piece to the puzzle and hopefully the car will work. It's a day later. I'm ready to start this car. I've topped up my cooling system with distilled water for the time being because I want to do a flush, and that should be fine. Even though I topped it up, I've already found a coolant leak, but I've tightened up the hose clamp, so hoping everything is fine now. But what I'll do now is I'll turn the car on if it starts. I don't see why it wouldn't. And let the car run for about 10 seconds. Then I'll turn it off and just quickly check if I've got any other leaks, let everything settle, and then we'll go for a proper round. So let's go now. I'm also going to keep a good look at my gauges to make sure that they work, because if they don't, then I've got some wiring trouble ahead of me. Here we go. All right. Has been a while. I've never disconnected the fuel pump before, but at the same time I never hear it actually prime. I must have not got something connected with the fuel. Okay, I forgot to attach a vacuum line, and I also forgot one of the cables. I didn't mention before, but my TPS sensor is in, so it's definitely not that. So let's give it another try. It's gonna work this time. I know it is. Okay. It's gonna work. It's gonna work. It's definitely going to work.
Okay, now I don't know why it's not working. I'm gonna have a look. There must be something that I've disconnected that I've forgotten. Oh, I don't think I connected the ECU. All right, okay. ECU was connected, but it wasn't grounded. Now I can hear the fuel pump. I'm just gonna go ahead. It's going to start now. I'm probably not gonna have enough charge if it doesn't, but let's just see. Here we go. All right. Yes, it's fucking started. All right. Okay. It's been a while. I'll let it do its thing. The gauges are working. Okay. Okay, I'm turning it off. All right, cool. But look, it works. That's the one thing. It definitely works. I still have a lot to look at, and there's a lot of work ahead of me before I can even get this thing driving. I think, oh, it smells pretty bad as well. Okay, look, that's it for today. All in this video. It's been many weeks, so it's not like I did this in one day. I'm gonna leave it there, and in the next episode, this thing is gonna be driving, and I'm going to try and work out what is next. I have a feeling the vacuum leak is still there, and I just need to find out why, how, all the questions of, you know, why it's not really working, etc. But in the meantime, that's it. I'll have to film everything in the next episode. Cool. All right. We're getting somewhere.
And make sure you follow my channel so you can keep up to date with all my new videos. Thanks.